Welcome to our new series, Rich People Say the Stupidest Things. And this certainly proves that wealth can buy you mansions, luxury yachts, the finest wine, but it cannot buy you intelligence or indeed self-awareness or, I don't know, basic humanity. Enter stage right, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, co-owner of Manchester United, 7th wealthiest person in the UK, business tycoon, and various other things that we're going to discuss. Brace yourselves for this.
Huge levels of immigrants coming in. I mean, the UK is being colonised. It's costing too much money. It will cause...
It's been colonised?
It'll cause... Well, yeah. The UK is being colonised by immigrants, really, isn't it? I mean, the population of the UK was 58 million in 2020. Now it's 70 million. That's 12 million people.
You met recently with Nigel Farage, didn't you?
I did.
Where to begin? Shall we start with the fact that Sir Jim Ratcliffe moved to the famed tax haven Monaco in 2020 at the peak of the COVID pandemic when the country was on its knees, estimated at the time to mean he would pay £4 billion less for his country's exchequer in tax. So he's actually a migrant on his own terms, someone colonising Monaco. He's not colonising Monaco. We'll come on to this colonising insanity. He talks about how the UK, which he's technically abandoned, can't afford things when he's made sure that he's no longer paying those vast sums to support the NHS, education, public services, and so on. And before that, way back in 2010, his chemicals giant Ineos moved to Switzerland in the hope of saving £100 million in tax a year. It received for that the consent of its lenders, the Royal Bank of Scotland and Lloyd Banking Group, both of which had been bailed out by you and I, the taxpayer, to the tune of billions after crashing the economy. This is, in the case of Sir Jim Ratcliffe, of course, a classic of that genre. Migrant bashers are raging patriots. Let's just discuss his figures in that interview, shall we? He says the population of the UK was 58 million in 2020 and now it's 70 million, thus claiming the population has increased by 12 million in about 6 years, which he's attributing to immigration. Now, this bloke, right, has an estimated £17 billion to his name. If he can't be arsed using Google, can he not just hire someone else to do it for him? The population of the UK in 2020 was actually an estimated 67 million, not 58 million, and now it is around 70 million. He got that one right. Bravo, buddy. Now, no biggie, but he underestimated the population of Britain in 2020 by, 9 million people. Easily done. Then again, I'd note the interviewer didn't correct him. I'm just asking for a crumb of journalists doing their job here. I didn't expect him to, have the exact numbers to hand, but surely they knew that the population of the UK has not increased from 58 million to 70 million in about half a decade or anything like that. Surely. The last time it was anywhere near 58 million was over a quarter of a century ago. Now, I've been trying to work out how he's managed this because it's honestly impressive how catastrophically wrong he's managed to be. All I can suggest is maybe he looked at the population of England, excluding Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. That last year was around 58.6 million. Is that what he did? I don't know. I mean, look, imagine being one of the biggest businessmen in, I was going to say the UK, but he is, after all, Monacan, and staging a major TV interview and getting the figures wrong on such a massive and inflammatory issue. I'm going to explain just how wrong he is, but amongst a few other things first as well, let's hear Ash Sarkar kicking his arse on television.
Sir Jim Ratcliffe's comments.
I think Jim Ratcliffe is a stinking hypocrite. Firstly, he became a tax resident of Monaco. That's £4 billion that could have gone towards British schools, the British NHS, could have gone towards British defence. Instead, he decided he wanted that money for his own pockets. Secondly, if it wasn't for immigration, I think that Man United would have had about 3 of their starting 11 last night. So Kobbie Mainoo, Luke Shaw and Harry Maguire. Not really going to beat West Ham with that, are you? And the kind of language of being colonised by immigrants, that moves beyond talking about immigration as a policy, which I'm all for. We should talk about every area of policy. You're talking about people. And you're talking about people who've come here to live, to work, to have families, as though they're a hostile, occupying force, taking away your language, your culture, your ability to survive.
Yeah. So we know there are some voters who do believe that the language is being taken away, that their culture is being taken away.
Where's the language being taken away?
There are some people who believe that.
Yeah, there are some people believe the moon's made of cheese, but it doesn't mean they're right. In terms of culture being taken away, I'll tell you what's done it. It's the fact that we imported American-style consumerism.
Amen, sister. Now, you may have seen that cartoon of Rupert Murdoch with a massive pile of cookies behind him and a big full plate of cookies in front of him, talking to a construction worker who's only got one cookie while he points at a black guy on the other side of the table with no cookies, saying, "Careful, mate, that foreigner wants your cookie." Jim Ratcliffe's interview is literally that cartoon. Now, the crisis-stricken Prime Minister Keir Starmer has, somewhat surprisingly, some might say, come out swinging. With his Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, who was running the show, gone, he seems to have decided to pivot a bit. He said of Ratcliffe's comments, offensive and wrong. Britain is a proud, tolerant and diverse country. Jim Ratcliffe should apologise. Let's park the fact that Ratcliffe backed Starmer's Labour in 2024, having correctly concluded that the party no longer posed any threat to a society rigged in favour of wealthy corporate interests, saying, "I've met Keir Starmer a couple of times. I like Keir, think he'll do a very sensible job." Well, what can we say? Jim Ratcliffe is both a statistician and a prophet. Now, Starmer is all of a sudden coming out swinging at these inflammatory comments about immigration. He is going to be livid, I'm telling you that for nothing, when he hears what this guy had to say last May.
Now, in a diverse nation like ours, and I celebrate that, these rules become even more important. Without them, we risk becoming an island of strangers, not a nation that walks forward together.
Island of strangers, literally the language of Enoch Powell, the right-wing Tory racist politician behind the notorious Rivers of Blood speech back in the 60s. That was the phrase, Island of Strangers, which became the defining headline of that speech, thanks to his advisors briefing it out as such. I was asked about this on BBC Radio 5 Live this morning.
Is it any worse than we're becoming an island of strangers, Owen Jones?
No, and I think Keir Starmer's a massive hypocrite. I mean, he ended up saying he regretted that because a speechwriter had put it in. Look, I know we don't expect Prime Ministers to just be hunched over their laptops, hacking away at their own speeches, but the fact he couldn't even read, the speech presented to him, I think sums up many of the problems of his premiership. He's kind of a front man for various people. But it's worse than that. He apologised for that one, by the way. But then he said in an introduction to a government paper that we'd had this open border experiment, which he said had done incalculable damage to this country. Look, this is a general problem, which is the country's in a mess. And rather than fix the country's problems, we have all these politicians and public figures blaming immigrants for those issues. If you're using the bully pulpit of the Prime Minister to claim that immigration has done incalculable damage to the country, I'm afraid you're not really in the best position to start denouncing other people's inflammatory rhetoric. Indeed, this government has fed us a relentless diet of migrant bashing, attacking the Tories for being too pro-migration, and it's introducing one of the harshest asylum regimes in Europe. Now, on Jim Ratcliffe, he's the owner of Manchester United Football Club. It's got a vast, diverse global fan base who I'm sure are going to be really delighted with these comments. As for Manchester United's main squad, 15 of the 21 players are foreign-born, over 70% if we're going there. Manchester United would collapse without immigration. A handy case study, which you can replicate across society. I mean, look, he says we can't afford immigration, but our most important institution, the NHS, would collapse without migrants. Over 36% of our doctors and 30% of our nurses are foreign nationals. Without immigration, the NHS, gone. Vast numbers of people die. But we would have fewer immigrants. So, got to look at the balance. As for not being able to afford immigration, the truth is we can't actually afford not to have immigration because our birth rate's collapsed. I mean, they've made it really, really very expensive to have kids in this country. That's our economic model. But it's plunged to 1.41 children per woman. To keep a country's population stable, if you take immigration out of the equation, it needs to be 2.1. And that would just mean it stands still. Now, we've got an ageing population. It means we have ever-growing numbers of pensioners who need to be supported by a working-age population. So if you reduce that working-age population, which we are now doing, by the way, then you basically have to deal with the fact you've got ever-growing spending on older people and ever fewer taxes being paid by workers. So without immigration, you have to have based on our economic model, higher taxes and spending cuts. Now, as a report found the other week, if net migration in this country comes to an end, the economy would be 3.6% smaller by the end of the 2030s, and the deficit would be bigger by 37 billion. So migrants paying more than they receive. This morning, it was received that quarterly growth in the UK with our economy was a paltry 0.1%, almost nothing, gone. I mean, we're not growing in practice. I know immigration to this country is plunging because that's, the big issue that we've been told we've got to deal with. And because our economic model is so broke, lower levels of immigration is bringing down our already pathetically low levels of growth. When immigration reaches net zero, which it's going to head towards, which it is heading towards, what are those people who blame immigration for all that else going to say? They're going to run out of excuses for why wages are so low, services are such a mess, why there's a housing crisis, we could go on. I'd be shitting myself if I were those people. Because what's their excuse going to be? When, they claimed immigration was causing our problems and then we don't have net immigration anymore. What are they going to do? What are they going to say? They're going to be naked and exposed. No, but you'll see what they'll do. They'll find some way of claiming, they'll probably still claim actually immigration's going up. We'll come on to that. Because it's business elites not paying their workers properly and governments not investing in services and an economic system rigged in favour of wealthy elites that is causing our problems, not migrants. Now, Ratcliffe used the term colonisation. Honestly, this really just sums up how we just haven't had a reckoning with our own history. I was in Kenya a few months ago, colonised by the British, and interviewed victims of colonialism. A 100-year-old Mau Mau veteran who was, I'm afraid to say, brutally tortured by our state. In the 1950s, we forced huge numbers of people into camps, slaughtered tens of thousands of people, as well as committing so many unspeakable atrocities that even the aforementioned Enoch Powell, the racist right-wing Tory MP, condemned the horror of what we were doing. That is just one example of colonisation, of European countries violently invading other lands, stealing their land, subjugating and murdering their people. Tens of millions of people were killed by European colonisation. One of the great horrors of our history. For this clown to use the term when discussing immigration, well, look, we've already got him down for statistician and prophet, so let's throw historian into the mix. There's another really important point to make. He left the country so he doesn't have to pay taxes here, but he depends on the state here spending money for his businesses. He depends on the state spending money on roads, bridges, ports, rail, power grids, gas networks, water, flood defences. He relies on the state spending on what is called human capital. The state funding schools, universities, apprenticeships, so his workforce is trained and given an education, as well as a healthcare system that enables them to be able to be healthy enough to work. He depends on the state spending money on protecting his property, as well as state-funded research, which his company relies on for things like technological improvement. He depends on tax credits being paid to his workers to top up their wages, as well as his company getting tax reliefs and investment allowances. Indeed, specifically, Jim Ratcliffe's chemical firms have received £70 million in state aid over the last 4 years, and the government's offered a £50 million grant and guaranteed a £75 million loan for his Ineos Grangemouth chemical plant. It's ridiculous! And he's just swanning off to Monaco, so he doesn't have to pay taxes here. Why does he need all that money as well? He's like, well, I've got X billion amount, but I don't want to, I will still be ludicrously rich, but I don't want to, I'd be slightly less ludicrously rich, but contributing to my country, which I rely on. Now, rich people spreading disinformation about migrants, so we blame the wrong people for all our problems, is why we're in a mess. Our media's done the same, bombarding people with false information to distort their sense of reality. I'll give you an example, right? 13% of the British population are immigrants. Do you know what people on average think it is when asked? 28%. Well over double the actual number. And among Reform UK voters, it's 34%. Here's another revealing figure. The polling shows that over half of people, 52%, think immigration and asylum is an important issue facing the country, making it only second to the cost of living. That was recent polling. But if you ask them what the most important issues locally are, local issues, that actually affect them locally in their community, only 26% choose immigration and asylum. So half the percentage nationally, meaning it comes at number 7 below the cost of living, health, the economy, crime, housing, jobs and unemployment, all the things that actually do matter. Eventually, I think we just have to ask ourselves, do we just keep on letting forever the rich businessmen like this guy and media outlets bombard us with false nonsense about migrants? We blame foreigners for our problems rather than the wealthy elites booming at our expense. Up to us, isn't it? Up to us, whether we resign ourselves to a country sinking ever further into the shit or we build something run in the interests of the majority. No pressure, guys. Please like and subscribe. Leave your thoughts in your comments. Help us take on the dire media ecosystem in the country, which has whipped up people into blaming migrants for their problems rather than the people who are actually to blame. Anyway, patreon.com/OwenJones84. Keep saying, finish my book, The Fall of the West. Can't wait to talk to you more about that. And then we'll do far more on the video channel. We're going to Gorton Denton this weekend to do a video there. Those videos are all made because of your support. Patreon.com/OwenJones84. Share the video, like, subscribe, leave your thoughts. I always read them. Speak in a bit.